Did that link work, Jess?
It says the feature is not currently available on tablets, but I'm going to try to send him the link.
Okay.
I just checked my email. Oh, I didn't check. Oh, but we have to do it. But I mean,
I'm gonna put it up anyways.
How is your Spanish test? I just tell you, there were some things I was like, oh, I know this. Other things, I like the one where you have to like fill in the blank of like, I was like, I don't know. And the Sarah that you're lucky if you have a good graph, like she said in class, she said you will not have to distinguish between a Sarah or ear. She said that, and then in the test it was like Sarah or ear. Oh wait, really? Because I definitely did.
wait, are there two completely different words?
No, because for Sarah and ear, it's like we say female.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was kind of, I didn't do that, because maybe not then, because like in the example, it has a word and next to it, like when the air got me, it was weird. It's like, well, I mean, it should have been, there was one little section that I like did not understand at all, I didn't even, like, I just guessed, but I had no idea. That was the one where I was supposed to fill in the blanks, because I was like, I don't know what we're trying to get at here. Like, and I like knew generally what was going on. Like what the words meant, I like know what was it, like molesta or whatever meant, or like incantata, whatever. I knew what but then I didn't understand like where it fit in context. Right. I couldn't understand what I was reading. Right. I know. It's hard.
You are the few, the faithful.
John told you he has to go to Jess to check that. Are people in the temple strip? If it's working.
Oh yeah.
My ward went to the temple strip, which is like mostly all Buddhist majors, so that's what I can do.
Okay, I'm just not sure if
Valid.
it's
Is
working.
Brandon in your ward?
Yeah, he's in my ward.
Okay.
Is this working? It looks like it's working.
Wyatt's in your ward too, right?
No. Yeah, okay. It should just be like
Katie
voice.
Perkins.
Yep, voice brings in.
Miranda Severs here. Is Brittany Shiraki?
I think that's it.
We like lost track of time. But like, how many years?
Wow.
Are you sorry? Oh,
Really?
yeah. Two and a half times.
I was like,
I gotta go. I just want to work, but it's in a book, so I'll scan it and send it to you. I didn't take roll, so as far as I know, you're off the hook.
I was all like,
This has sense. Yeah.
I was literally like, then I was like, do you want to just stop the lesson?
All right, friends. We need to get started because I need to end class early. Because I was just called into a meeting at 2:15, so I'm ready to leave. If I go over to like 5 after, then you need to get President Elizabeth. Okay, so what are things you want to remember about this guy? Forever and ever and ever and never forget. Don't hit it. That's good advice. It moves. Why is that important? Why is lyrical position important?
We want it low.
We want it low. Why do you?
Because it will make everything bad. Like they're tight and tension.
So tension's one reason, right? Yes, tension is one reason. Space, why would we want space? Because space equals what? Resonance. I mean, we'll talk about resonance later. So it has to do with tension, it has to do with resonance, it has to do with all the things. What else do you want to remember about phonation in particular? And never ever forget. Oh, see, that's why we ask this question now, so that we can remember it now. Bring it into your conscious brain and talk about it. What is subglottal pressure?
If I remember rightly, it's like when your vocal folds are all the way closed into the pressure builds up underneath it or something. Something along those lines.
So you're looking down the glottis right now, right? This is down the glottis. So when the vocal folds, so subglottal pressure is this pressure that builds underneath the vocal folds.
So
Right? When the vocal folds shut, there's all that pressure and tension.
does
It'll
that
pop back open, yes.
only happen if you're stacking air? It definitely
No,
happens when you're stacking
It happens when you're stacking air. It can happen when there's too much tension surrounding the mechanism itself.
Okay.
It can have, like if the vocal folds aren't properly and efficiently adducting and abducting when you send the air through, a bunch of pressure can build underneath. And it is often because of tension where?
Wait, under the glottis?
Well, but where does it, what creates that? Well, the pressure is under the glottis, but what kind of tension creates that pressure?
Neck and jaw. Or tongue.
Tongue or jaw, particularly the tongue, freezing is what can lock it in place, keeps the larynx from moving freely, sort of freezes up the tone, and then builds a bunch of subglottal pressure.
So it's the tongue that most times the culprit of subglottal pressure.
I would say yes, in general. I mean, you can have all kinds of other things that get involved, but tongue tension is sort of the great tensor. The tongue is
So
large.
question.
Yes.
With that, how can you see that?
Can you watch it?
So maybe let's say you can hear that they have this going on.
Can you see tongue tension?
Yeah.
Wonderful question. The short answer to that is yes and no.
Like, I don't know.
Here's a couple of things. So first of all, has anyone here ever heard sing with an open throat? This often comes up when we talk about resonance. So that's a really good open-throated singer. Or using that name yourself, like, oh, I just feel so open-throated. You've heard that word, open throat. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot in voice teachers, like sing with an open throat. There are no throat opening muscles. There isn't a single muscle that like physically opens the throat. So it's a fixed shape, right? There's nothing that's going to change the shape of this, right? So often when people will take that advice and misinterpret it, and they'll do weird things with their tongue, because the tongue is the only thing that kind of goes deep enough that your brain can attach any kind of sensation to that affects the opening. So it'll do things like depress the tongue. So against the bottom of your mouth, you make it feel like it's open. I think after I've done a good amount of singing and it feels healthy and my throat still feels like nothing happened even though I sang a bunch, it feels, oh yeah, that felt really open. We'll use that word. And then we'll say, yeah, you guys should sing like that. You should sing with an open throat. And a student who doesn't know what that feels like goes, okay. And just starts to press their tongue down. So, signs that there is tongue tension. What do you think? Have you seen any signs of tongue tension? Have you worked through any signs of tongue tension? Yeah.
I feel like last year I did where I feel like we did a lot of exercises where you know like had to sing with your tongue outside of your mouth.
We did some of that stuff to relieve it.
Yeah.
Right? So we did things like ah, and you have to keep the curl on their tongue. The best thing about that is you do it in front of a video camera, and they're like, oh yeah, my tongue is so far out there, and you feel like you're actually holding it out, and yet it's pulling back while you're singing. It's an exercise that we use if a couple other things haven't already worked. I always start with posture, I always start with breath, and just try to move the energy of the breath, but if that happens and there's still tongue tension, then there's all kinds of these other little exercises you can do. I like to talk about the tongue as little as possible. I like to talk, because as soon as you start talking about the tongue, as we said before, this feels like it becomes this massive unruly organ, which it is. So yes, that's a way to help solve it. What do you think? What things do you think you might be able to see?
Can you see it like here?
Sometimes.
Sometimes like, cause I remember in lessons having to like look in the mirror and she would point out when like my right here would move from my tongue, I think. I don't know.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, is the thing. So that's the problem with trying to see tongue tension. Everyone do this. I want you to light your fingers right here and swallow. What happens when the muscles get tight?
Which is when you're swallowing.
It presses down.
It kind of presses in, like you're doing right there. It kind of presses in and up, right? Can you see that?
Probably like only subtly, right?
Kind
you
of.
feel it, but you can't.
So, or put your finger right here. Swallow. Can you see it? And if you were trying to focus that much on it, you probably would be distracted from the things you actually need to fix. So you can sometimes see it pull away. One of the ways, this typically is a little bit more common in women, and it's more of a way to see jaw tension, but it could also be a way of seeing tongue tension. If the sternocleidomastoid, there's these, not the muscles themselves, but there's these veins right here that come out. Sometimes when you see someone singing and these veins start to bulge right on top of the sternocleidomastoid muscles, can be a sign of tension in the tongue or the jaw, mostly the tongue. But there are some people for whom these veins are just more prominent than others, so it can bulge a little bit, the tongue tension. But they might not. So you have to like listen for it. Like listen for, okay, this is bulging, but it still sounds like everything is okay. A sign of jaw tension is the wobble in the jaw. Like on high notes in particular with women, the jaw gets really wobbly when the tongue and the jaw get tight. That being said,
Like,
for,
like a vibrato.
like with the vibrato,
Like it looks
I'm sure
like
you've all
vibrato,
seen
not like sideways.
no, it's just like an up and down. And it's funny because
like right here.
you'll watch some cartoons, like because Disney, for example, watches when they sing and they animate everything they see. I noticed it first on Hunchback of Notre Dame, when the priest in the beginning, when he sings with something a qualm, he sings the word qualm, and they write in, like they animate it in his jaw wobbling, and so I know young, like 6, 7-year-old girl singers who'll be like, oh, my favorite singer sings high notes or jaw wobble, so they force it. They like make their jaw wobble, thinking that's what singers do, and it's actually you're building intention from the time you're like 7 or 8 years old. That being said, some men and women's jaws just wobble more than others. So it's not always a sign that, oh, we've got to get rid of that completely, but it can be a sign of tension. Yes?
So if you see something that's making you think they're doing something weird with their tongue, but maybe it's not because you're seeing it. Like I think about Autumn, and when she was singing in her mini lesson, I felt like I was seeing she was doing something weird.
Where she pulls her jaw
And
down.
like jaw and tongue.
Yep.
But I thought it was maybe more tongue than jaw. So like, what do you do? How do you pinpoint what it actually is?
Well, let's talk about that in just a second. And the good news is it doesn't really matter which one it is, unless you do a bunch of other things and it's still there. And then there's just a couple of things that you can do.
Okay.
For all of your students who are just starting out and they're beginners, don't worry about it. Worry about getting them on the breath, worry about their posture, worry about getting as much, not in terms of force, but getting them to be thinking about this energy will relieve most of what's happening here. And if you accomplish that of getting their voice on their breath, and there's still a little wobble, a little bulge, it's probably okay. It's probably not that big of a deal. Autumn does set her jaw and really hold her tongue. So there are some things that she needs to do first with this.
Would that be the...
Maybe, I wouldn't do it first. She still just doesn't know how to use this. So I just focus on the breath.
So maybe like je would be a good
Yes.
one to
Vocal
connect the
function
breath.
sounds.
Okay.
Yes. Randy, you have a question?
It's somewhat related, somewhat not.
Okay.
Old people,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like their jaw wobbles no matter what. But maybe not. I'm not sure if that's like an older person thing. Like,
It can be both.
Are you ageist?
Yeah, seriously. Their vibrato tends to wobble a little bit more than others, but their jaws,
or maybe I'm just thinking about their vibrato.
probably more about their vibrato than their jaw. Though if their vibrato is really slow, it's often due to tension, which would make especially in an older woman's case, where everything's a little bit more elastic at that age, where it might wobble a little bit more. And that's a whole another thing that we could mention briefly. So my teacher, who ended up being the reason I came here, he was my teacher at BYU, who then taught here after he retired. I used to do these workshops with him, and he'd always talk about trying to get rid of old lady slow vibrato. And he was really critical about it. And once he got the breath moving and everything else going, for most of those women, it would at least speed up a little bit, but there was often still somewhat of a wobble. So he would always tell them, it's all about your technique, it's all about your... And I never forget the first day I came to him and I said, so, just need to understand something, Clayton. So, what happens when you have arthritis? You know, do you know what happens when you have arthritis? What's actually being affected?
Joints.
Joints, but what about the joints? Where?
Inflammation.
Inflammation of cartilage. What is this entire thing? Cartilage. And so, because he used to always talk about, well, I'm like 80 whatever years old, and my voice doesn't wobble, and I'm really big. It's like, but Clay, you're made out of rubber. I said, do you have arthritis? He said, no, my family, good genes. And I'll never forget when I asked him that question in this conversation, he went, wait, exactly. Have you asked any of those women if they have arthritis? No. You've been doing this for a long time, Clay. You know, so we don't know the effects of like, so when you have arthritis, your cartilages are calcifying, right? They calcify. It builds up of sodium. So the same thing could be happening to all of these cartilages, thus making it so they just move a little bit slower and weaker, just like when you have arthritis in your joints. And there's some new-ish research on that, but we don't know. So that could be contributing to the wobble too, is they just have calcified cartilages. Think about the arytenoids that are responsible for pivoting and pulling the vocal folds shut and influence the speed of vibration. If those were heavily calcified, it's amazing we can sing at all still, right? So.
Can I ask a question that may deviate from phonation? Well, not really. So I was trying, one of my students, she can't do a lip bubble or a lip trill. What is another alternative? I just had her go zzz, but then I just kind of was like, we don't know how to do either, I don't know what to do.
I kind of love that you did that instead. That's a good one. That's a good one because it'll get disengaged. And zzz is good because some of the other vocal function sounds take a lot more energy than zzz. The issue is zzz is you won't be able to go as high with it, but that's going to be the issue either way. So when I have a student who can't do it, I ask them to play and try to figure out how to do it in the shower, in their room, because it is so useful. So and it might take them a while. Do they have braces? Does this have braces? Sometimes that makes it hard.
She just got them off.
Oh, see, that could contribute to like the feeling of sensitivity and tightness. Might keep her from being able to bubble her lips. So one of the first things to try, and you can all try this, is if you just lightly put your fingers on the outside of your lips and then push them away from your teeth. It makes it a lot easier to bubble your lips.
Okay,
So try that first. Don't squeeze it too hard this way, just lightly. You're just trying to push them away from your, give them a little bit of space from the teeth.
Do we go over vocal function sounds and how to use
A little bit, yes, we will. So, but that's one way to do it, and then again, get them to play with it. If none of that works for a while, a hum isn't terrible.
Okay.
A really buzzy hum
Okay.
is where I usually go next. Yes, sorry, Mackenzie, yes.
Like you said zh, would that be a good alternative as well?
It is, it takes a lot of energy. I like to use zh when I'm really trying to kickstart this. We haven't talked anything really about all of my vocal function sounds, about 6 to 8 of them. And I use them for different things, and we should probably talk about them more at the end of talking about the 4 parts of the instrument because they have different effects on each of those in terms of coordination. The big thing we have not talked about in terms of phonation is registers. We haven't talked much about those, right? And that needs to be talked about when we talk about phonation, because I don't think we covered that enough. Brandon, you had a question?
I was just going to ask if a rolled R works.
So first, lip bubble. Second, a tongue trill or a rolled R is good. And then third, I'd say is humming. If neither of those work, that's what I typically do. Do we have we're doing phonation? What is next articulation? Okay, no, we're going to talk about registration at week 8. Okay, we'll talk more about registers.
Open vowel. Oh.
One of the things about lip bubbling, and this applies to humming too, is you want to make sure you're working on that laryngeal space when you're lip bubbling. And the way you do that is by making sure the vowel on the inside of your mouth is an vowel, and as they go up, it stays up, and that trains their jaw to drop, and the larynx to stay low, but gently.
So would you tell them to think like
think up. I think up. And sometimes I have them just go and then just make it silly, and then as they go up, and I always use that same pattern. If that pattern is too much and they can't get the breath to move that long, I'll do something simple like and just have them go up as high as, get to where it starts to get uncomfortable, and then go a little further. And then kind of go down a little further, and sort of nudge it up and down. But yeah, that's the lip bubble itself. The reason I love it so much is because you have to engage the air, but you can't, if you over-engage, it won't bubble consistently.
Right.
So what I tell my students when we do the lip bubble, first is that the vowel needs to be and they're trying to find the minimum amount of air it takes to keep the lips bubbling. It's also why I don't say lip buzz, because lip buzzing to me implies a certain amount of speed, of pressure. Lip bubble implies a little bit less. So if I can just if I can get my students to just buy into that one thing of the, it is still, after what, 13, 14 years, if I'm in a rush, even if I'm not in a rush, but if I am hurrying to something, if I just do the lip bubble, I'm ready to sing, at least to a certain degree. Okay? What else? Other questions? Okay, the two other things. I did quickly just want to show you, I was looking for some good videos of showing, we're going to talk about the three different sort of theories, the myoelastic theory, the one mass, and the three mass theories, which you're going to want to understand. But as I was looking, it was really funny, I found there's this picture, a rare glimpse of a singer's vocal folds, and I come across it, it wasn't until today that I realized, it has like 2.5 million views. I know her, she's a good friend of mine, Lisa Eden is the person's folds. I've competed with her in Austria, and so she's like, she's really awesome. And then I was like, wait, those are her vocal folds. So I feel like I need to text her now and be like, I've seen inside of your body. Like I've seen inside of your body. How creepy is that?
Very.
A very glimpse of a singer's vocal folds. And it's like
Especially that word.
800 likes,
It's
500
very
dislikes.
ambiguous. It's like,
Yeah, 550 dislikes. It's like even
I
there, right?
saw your vocal folds.
Like, who's judging?
But the fun thing about it is this Lisa is amazing. She is a wonderful singer. She's a wonderful example of how hard it is to make a living in the field, because she's beautiful, she sings incredibly well, and she's still kind of doing the cruise ship young artist thing, and she's a little bit younger than me, and she's incredible, and she has all the, like, she checks all the boxes. This is going to be her singing. I'll show you the whole thing. If you're a little squeamish, you might not want to look. But you'll see the camera going down her nasal passage and then onto the vocal fold, and you hear her talking some. And then, so you'll see how it looks when she's talking. And then she sings some Puccini. She sings, and you get to see when you really engage the voice, how it looks. A rare glimpse.
How do you?
Hey, there she is. That's Lisa.
How do you like sing when you have a thing up your nose and down your throat?
It's when they scope you through your mouth that you can't sing. But when they scope you through your nose, it's really easy because it's just sort of sitting up here. It just feels a little off, a little weird, but it's fine.
I could never, ever do this.
It's really not that bad.
Wow, that's so distinct.
And then mine is really curved in. See, there's down the glottis to the trachea.
Whoa.
And her arytenoids are somewhere in there, right?
Behind where you can't
Vocal
see.
folds themselves.
Ew, I'm sorry, that's amazing.
Amazing and yeah.
So beautiful.
So when you can see what happens when she talks. She can clear her throat.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I can understand what it's saying.
Do you see how they lengthen when she sings up? It kind of goes from this and then it stretches when she sings higher.
Yeah.
And the bumpy part nearer to us is the back of her tongue, right? On the bottom.
Where so the tongue would be here. This is the back of her neck.
Yeah.
You're looking down.
Okay.
I understand all the difference now. I understand that it's like it's cutting out.
Well, it's hard to keep that steady when you're singing Puccini.
What? Oh, sorry.
Oh my god.
Oh, that's amazing. You see the contact points go from this to like the whole vocal folds when she was singing soft and loud.
Oh my god.
That's how much contact and how long that is. That's a pretty good misa de voce with a thing down her nose.
That's awesome.
That's why she beat me.
But when we were looking at it, we were looking down the throat, and so the arytenoids were up here. So where was her face? Her face was like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
Her face was
so
this way.
if you look
her
at it,
face was like this way, the bottom
Yeah,
part,
yeah, yeah.
like
yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
it's like facing down
Yeah.
this way.
Right, that's what I thought. But so like your tongue is way bigger than we realize, right? So that wasn't like the very bottom of her tongue. No, it still isn't.
Like when you first go in, you can
bumpy
kind of
like
see
the
it.
tongue part. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
it's
orient
the
myself.
tongue goes very, very deep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any comments? Any?
That looked like
Cool.
exercise. That was tiring me out. That's all I go to watch stuff.
Anyone who says singing is not hard work.
Just like
It
watch the
doesn't
video.
know.
Yeah.
So I know sometimes her vocal folds wouldn't close all the way.
They were mostly, but the part of it is understanding that there's a strobe effect going on. So it looks like they're doing this, and they're actually like going super. There were a couple spots though where you saw at the tip of it, they weren't closed, and you could hear it. There was a little bit of breathiness in the tone. Like I'm sure she didn't warm up or anything. I'm sure she didn't. So she's just being, hey, sing Puccini out of nowhere. But
The thing
that being said, even great singers, every once in a while, it doesn't quite close all the way. You can see, particularly at that top point, right, where the vocal folds come together, that's where they tend to not want to close, because that's where that last final little bit of closure has to happen.
It seems like it's also kind of like the arytenoids kind of like get in the way of each other.
Well, but they sit on top a little bit, so they don't necessarily bump into each other. It's more that there's some tension around it, kind of keeping it from releasing and stretching all the way. Like on its own, this, even though this is a fixed shape, everything going on in here is just able to sort of be flexible and move, and really, when we tense around it, like when that tongue gets involved and locks it down, then all these muscles that want to freely move in there, you saw all that tissue around there. If that gets caught up and frozen, then the vocal folds aren't able to do their work freely as we would want them to. So tension is usually what keeps them, or a lack of air coming through. Yes?
From what I was noticing too, like it went into the nasal cavity.
Yeah, passage, yeah.
It just seemed like there's a lot of movement above the epiglottis.
Well, think about it. Every time you breathe, there's so much movement every time you breathe. And then every time you have an onset, there's a breath, and then there's the moment of onset. And then there's a breath that moves again, and onset. So this is always moving up and down.
I wasn't expecting that. So
Yeah.
it was like matching up with her vibrato. I was like, that
Oh, well,
was
and yes, as it was vibrating, the actual vibration inside is pretty significant. And you can see if there's a lot of tension around there, how that vibration would spread when she and I competed together, the big competition we did together, she sang, what's that French aria? It's so hard, and she did it so well. And usually when you see wobble, it's like when you're trying to sing high and soft. That's when like everybody wobbles. And she did, and the one that she did, there was no wobble at all. It was so engaged on her body. It was just really, really good. She kicked my butt, jerk.
I'm just like in awe. That was amazing.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of time. I would say on your, because I need to get over to this meeting. But I think it's a good idea for you guys to sort of understand the process that we've gone to get from the myoelastic aerodynamic model of singing. So if you go to page 104 in your hymnal and just read through those sections. This is where it talks about the Bernoulli effect. That's the main thing I want you to understand. Throughout history, I talked to you a little bit about how there was this belief, is it muscles or is it breath? And then in the 60s, they created this myoelastic model, which is essentially saying that, yeah, it's both. It's both a muscular process, which is awesome. But then there's just not enough time to really put this in a way that would be understandable. So I want you to read through this section. This is where we started to understand the Bernoulli effect in terms of how it applies to the voice. But then as you go through, you'll see that we began to realize it became much more complex. So the one mass model is the idea that once you actually get this whole thing together, it's just pulling one big mass of vocal fold together. And then as you saw in that video that I showed you, now we know there are basically 3 points of contact on the vocal fold, so that's the 3 mass model, and how that's affected muscularly and aerodynamic. You don't need to understand everything about that. The actual physics involved are pretty complex. I just think it's important as a teacher to understand, at least sort of be able to visualize what's going on in there. I've talked to you about, this is circling around to, can you see tongue tension? And the short answer is not really, but if you're an empathetic teacher and you know how that's supposed to look and feel, you can kind of insert that into your body and you can feel your tongue tense when they sing. Respond to that. Like if they're singing and you feel yourself like, there will be lessons, and it took me forever to realize this, there'll be lessons when I come out like, oh, my back hurts, or oh man, like I just feel tired vocally, and I didn't even say very much. And then that was early on when I realized, oh wait a minute, that was them. That was their singing making me tired. So you have to be careful when you demonstrate and when you try to correct, because you'll do it over and over again the way they're singing. So you can listen empathetically and you will feel. And so just really briefly, the last 2 minutes I have, you asked for like how to get the tongue, and we'll talk more about this as we go. Again, first step is vocal function sounds, first step is support, first step is posture. And yes, I said first step that many times because those are all first steps. Depending on where they're at and their understanding of those principles. If their posture's good, don't spend all day on it. You know, if it's on the breath, then don't spend all day on it, move on. But little things you can do, like there is the tongue curling exercise. You can have them sing a stretch of music with their tongue out and make it done ugly. The problem is you can't do that really high and they'll hurt themselves, so you do it like a middle register stuff. Lip bubbling is actually a great way to relieve tongue tension. So you can so when it's, especially when it's higher stuff, have them lip bubble it, because then they'll learn how to sort of release and stretch it.
So not just an exercise, but like whatever song they're working on?
If they're working on a song and it just doesn't want to work, you just have to lip bubble it. And you have to do it enough times. One of the mistakes we make is they get it right once and we go, right, like they do it wrong 8 times, they get it right once, and they go, you got it, and then you, now sing it, and they can't do it for some reason. Well, they need some sense of muscle memory. So once they get it, have them do it at least 3 times, right, quote unquote right. The problem is, it would be better if they did it like 10 times. But we have research that says after 3 repetitions of anything, our brains shut off. So like when you're doing sit-ups and you want really great form, or push-ups and you want really great form, you do 3 of them and your brain's like, I want to think about something else. Even if you're doing 10. So you have to warn your students, we're going to do this 5 times. After 3, you're not going to want to think about it. So you can keep good form, you know, while you're doing it. There's one more thing I was going to say. Oh, one of the things you can do if everything else isn't working, this little trick I showed you, depending on where the tongue is tensing, is either have them lightly put their fingers here or here and have them swallow, and just say something like, I don't even use the word tongue. I just say, do you feel your swallow muscles getting hard? Yeah, I feel it getting hard. Okay, now speak and keep your swallow muscles soft. Okay. And then they sing, and I have them keep their finger here lightly. Sing keeping your swallow muscles soft. And they don't have a swallow muscle. Right?
Do you tell them after that, or
No.
It
depends on who they are.
They're thinking about it too much.
Exactly. It depends on who they are. I'll just let them think about their swallow muscle. Okay. Okay, I need to go. What other questions? Last minute questions? Okay, we start our new unit on Monday. So a new quiz. Did all of you do your 3 tries on this quiz? Okay. I've looked through your quizzes and see tons of places you've misspelled. Several of you have it like all right, and it'll be fine. I haven't figured out how to change it when it says it's wrong. So I'm gonna figure that out. Like everybody misspelled cartilage. And
That's because the autocorrect is wrong.
It is,
really?
and
Yeah.
that.
Weird. Well, maybe that's why.
But let's put it on the auto.
Okay. So anyway, so I will fix it. I just can't figure out how to do it.
Or you can just
So
create
someone
new
will
ones
show
or
me.
something.
I'm still struggling to get my videos up.
Okay.
I'm starting my second round of lessons, and we'll try them on YouTube now.
Yeah, the YouTube thing is way better. Uploading videos to Google Drive takes forever. So I just would like leave it overnight sometimes. I would just like set it up and just leave it. Like when we have concert video stuff, this is why we do everything on YouTube now for us too, because it takes forever. So do your best.
And do you just take the link from the drive? And then,
Yeah. There's a little share button, and then there's a get a shareable link, and then you can put it up.
Okay.
So far from what I've seen and heard, I love what you're doing with your students. They're lucky to have you. So keep it up. Ask questions as you have them. Make comments. Try to rotate where you're making comments, like that you're not watching the same, like commenting on the same 2 videos each time. Okay? Alright, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Hymn number 1. Hymn number 8. Pilot.
Oh really?
I was trying to think of some funny way that they're connected, but.
So I've done my second lesson. So I give me your lyrics.
Take actually
Yeah, well,
everything but
Well then.